Hi, I'm Megan. I work at EVPL Oak Glen. Before coronavirus, I was working regularly with teens, so I've always kept up with the young adult titles that are coming out. So I thought today I would share with you some of the books that are coming out in September that I'm very excited for. The first book that we have comes out September 1st. It's called Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. Aiden has never published anything before. He is a debut author. He is writing this book as an own voices author. It's telling the story of a young man named Yadriel who is trans. His family is very traditional and don't necessarily accept his gender identity. So he has decided he is going to prove that he is a real brujo, which means witch, by summoning this spirit with the help of his best friend, who is also his cousin. The ghost that they summon is not exactly who they are meaning to bring forth, so the person or the ghost that ends up being summoned is this young man named Julian, who is sort of the bad boy at Yadriel's school. And he is not willing to leave until he ties up some loose ends and settles some scores. So they sort of team up, and over the course of the book also have a budding romance and a little bit of a love story there. But again, Aiden Thomas is an own voices author. He is himself Latinx and trans, and so he's telling that story from his perspective as someone who has experienced these things. The second book that we have coming out on September 1st is called Punching the Air by Ibi Zeboy and Yusuf Salam. So Ibi Zeboy is already a pretty well-known prolific author. Some of her books would include Pride. She's the editor of Black Enough, which is a collection of short stories about being Black in America. And she also wrote American Street. I believe she has several others. They are all already available at the library if you're interested. Yusuf Salam is actually a member of the Exonerated Five, or you might also know them as the Central Park Five. And Ibi has really pulled from Yusuf's story to create this character of Amal Shahid. So Amal is a 16-year-old who attends art school. He's very invested in creating art and writing, but he's still, despite his best efforts, sort of looked down upon at his school. And he ultimately ends up being in the wrong place at the wrong time and being convicted of a crime that he did not commit and sent to prison. And while he's in prison, he turns back to art, which has always been a refuge for him, to help him process the experience and work through the trauma of what is happening and this wrongful conviction. Ibi is telling the story through verse, which means it essentially reads like poetry. You only are going to have a few lines per page, so it's quite a page turner. But because it's such a poignant and timely story that you'll want to take your time with, sort of helps balance the book. You can take your time with it, but each word on each page is going to be very, very meaningful. And again, that book comes out September 1st. So on September 15th, have a book that is probably my most anticipated book of the entire year. I am so excited for this one. It is called Each of Us a Desert by Mark Oshiro. Mark Oshiro has also written a book in the past. I believe he's just written one. It's called Anger is a Gift. That one's already in our catalog if you would like to check that out. In the meantime, this book, Each of Us a Desert, is about a young woman named Sochi. She lives in this sort of desert-scape fantasy world where she is, I don't know whether you would want to call it destined or cursed to wander the desert alone and tell the stories of her village out to the sky, to the desert. But the one thing that she's always sought is a companion or kindred spirit to share her life and her experiences with. And that ends up coming in the form of another young woman named Amelia, who is her village's mayor's daughter. And she's sort of cold and aloof, but the two of them, over the course of the story, form a connection. And there is some romance there, which I'm kind of a sucker for. Another sort of fantasy element of the story is that at night, the desert is not necessarily a safe place for two young women to be, or for anyone to be. There are these creatures or spirits that come out at night that are very dangerous, and that the girls have to go up against, as well as just it being sort of a travel story and a romance story between these two young women. So again, that comes out September 15th. So also on September 15th, we have Horrified by Katrina Leno coming out. Katrina Leno is actually an author that I really love. She wrote Summer of Salt and You Must Not Miss, which are two books that we already have in our young adult section here at the library, if you would like to check those out while you wait for Horrified. Horrified is the story of a teenage girl named Jane. Her father has just recently passed away, and in the wake of that trauma, her and her mother are moving back to her mother's hometown in Maine. And they actually move back into the mother's childhood home, which has become pretty dilapidated. It's sort of an old, creepy house that they're moving back into. Jane is not adjusting well at her new school, and her mother seems to really be struggling with being back in her childhood home. And in the midst of all this, there is this storage room in the house, or at least Jane believes it is a storage room. Her mother keeps it locked. She ultimately finds out that this is a bedroom, a girl's bedroom that appears to be empty, but there is definitely some mystery surrounding this room. Why is her mom keeping it locked, and is it as empty as it appears to be? So the question throughout this book is sort of, is Jane seeing and experiencing some of the things that she is as a result of the trauma and the grief that she experienced from losing her father, or is there something actually more sinister and supernatural and horrid happening in this house? I'm really excited for this one. I think it's going to be pretty dark, pretty creepy, another good book to read going into the fall. So that one comes out September 15th. September 29th, the book that I want to highlight is called A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. Once again, kind of partial to a lot of these authors, and that's why I've picked these books. But Naomi Novik has written several really wonderful fantasy books, a couple standalones, as well as a rather long series that are all for adults. So this is her first venture into the young adult book world, and I'm really excited to see how that goes. I've noticed some people are listing this as an adult book, so there may be some more mature themes in this book. But a lot of people are also listing it as a young adult book, so hopefully it should be appropriate for any teenage reader. The story of A Deadly Education is about this school, kind of a dark school of magic. I keep thinking of it sort of like if Slytherin was the entirety of Hogwarts and Snape was running the school, you would kind of get this end result. There are a lot of secrets, and you should not be in the hallways alone. There are only two ways to actually leave the school. You graduate or you die, because there are creatures and monsters that live in the walls of this school. So it's just very much a dark magic school. So at this school, friendships are not really a thing. If you are friends with someone, they are more your ally. It's a strategic friendship to help you get ahead. Elle does not have any friends or allies, but she does have a very, very strong, powerful magic within herself that is sort of unmatched at this school. But if she can't control it, if she unleashes it, it could essentially kill everyone in the school. So we are going to get her story and the story of the school, and I think it's going to be a very, very interesting read. And again, maybe a good book as we move into the fall, sort of like dark, damp settings with monsters and magic, and I think it'll be a very fun book. So a few other books that are coming out this month that I don't have time to properly highlight are Legendborn by Tracy Dion. That's going to be an Own Voices fantasy book. On September 15th, we will also have Watch Over Me by Nina LaCour. And then on September 29th, you should keep an eye out for Dear Justice by Nick Stone, which is a follow-up to Dear Martin, which is about a young man writing letters to Martin Luther King Jr. about the present situation. And I'm very excited for the sequel to that. So, of course, there are many other wonderful books that weren't mentioned here that will be coming out in the month of September. If you're interested in sort of keeping up with what's coming out and keeping up with the library in general, you can follow us on our social media pages. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time. Bye!